Leap of Fate podcast fans. Welcome to this week's episode with yours truly, Randy Silver. As always, the Leap of Fate is around overcoming adversity, dealing with life challenges, and making sure you can reach your dreams, make those dreams reality, however that may be. As you can see, we're doing another fireside chat here. I have my friend Julia Lee here. Julia, give away for us. She's
Hi,
awesome. She
everyone.
lives out in New York. She wanted to come on and talk about that latter part, which is trying to reach for your goals, overcoming adversity, and dealing with what may come with life. So Julia's backstory is this. Julia was working at Google for 6 years. She started out in the San Francisco Bay Area, moved with her boyfriend, Forrest, who I'm good friends with as well. Shout out, Forrest. Love you. And they moved to New York together, and they have a great life out there. However, she probably wasn't the most fulfilled at Google. All of us know Google, big company, dream type of job, but she wanted to move more into sustainability. So she took the leap of fate on herself and left Google for 3 months to just kind of hang out, relax, have some downtime like I'm doing. But the catch is she didn't have a safety net. So she's just taking the leap on herself, try to go make her dreams reality to move into sustainability. So the four key topics she wants to talk about today are: one, developing a healthy relationship with your intuition and following the intuition, that voice in your head, because you know it's right. Two, ID the fears that you may have in your life and overcome them, how you can overcome those fears and try to again make that leap of faith for yourself. Three, being comfortable with ambiguity. What does that mean? How do you kind of go to that space you don't know? How do you teach yourself? A lot of stuff that people have talked about in this podcast is how you dive in to learn so that way you can learn on the job and continue as you go. And then lastly, which I think is probably the most important, is don't undersell yourself. Know your self-worth, know what you deserve, know what you can get out there, and don't settle for anything less. So Julia is going to talk about all that, how she's doing on herself today. Obviously, this is very close to my heart as well. As you guys know, I am not at Need AB anymore. So a lot of these same things I'm dealing with on the day-to-day. Julia, excited to have you on. Before we bring you in, I just want to say to all the law fans, thank you again so much. I've already got some great feedback from y'all on this new fireside chat type of Zoom background. I really like it. I think it's really cool. It makes it feel like a very immersive experience. So thank you for letting me experiment with this a little bit. Please do go rate, subscribe on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, uh, Twitter, all of them at Leap of Fate Pod, or follow me at Randy Silver 09. I post all the daily videos that come out with the clips with this. We post the vlog videos every week. We do how-to videos and so much more. So please go. If you like it, it really helps me grow the Leap of Fate message, the audience, so we can continue to spread what we're about to talk about today with Julia to the world. Now, with that being said, let's dive into it. Julia, welcome to the podcast.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Randy, for having me here.
My pleasure. Was there anything about the intro that I may have missed that you think is important for us to bring up before we dive in?
No, I don't think so. I think that was a great skeletal overview, and we can then go into each of those themes more in depth on the actual episode.
Awesome. So I think a great place to start is, you were at Google, as I said, for 6 years, and you didn't feel like it was the right place for you. You wanted to leave the sustainability. For most people, Google's probably that like pinnacle. I work there, I'll be the rest of my life. What made you feel like it wasn't the right thing for you?
Yeah. Yeah, great question. It's funny because I think I figured out just as I was joining Google at the same time that it wasn't necessarily going to be my end all be all. And the reason I say that is because I figured out right after graduating college that working on solving for climate change was my end goal. I read this book called Ishmael and essentially changed my life. It changed my perspective on things. And I just had this, this realization that if we're not solving for climate change and figuring that out, there's nothing else to figure it out. And so to me, it just felt like the biggest challenge and opportunity of our lifetimes. But at the same time, I was interviewing for a job at Google, and Google's an amazing company. It's a great place to develop your skill set. And since I already sort of had my foot in the door there, and it seems like there was an opportunity to take advantage of all of the things I could learn at Google,
Mm-hmm.
I always thought, okay, let me join Google. Let me, learn everything I can learn here. Let me develop a ton of transferable skills. And then eventually I'm going to take those skills and I'm going to move them into a sustainability focused career. And when I joined Google, it was on the AdWords team. So I was what we call an account strategist. I was basically helping Google's existing advertising clients figure out their strategies to grow their businesses. And was at Google for 6 years working advertising for the first 3 years on the advertising side, and then for the last 3 years on the publishing side. But I thought, okay, let me join Google. I'll stay there 4 years, and then I'm going to leave and go to a startup. And I ended up staying there 6 years, but it was this process of every couple years or towards the end, every couple months, I'd be asking myself the question, is it time to leave yet? And
Mm.
I'd be checking in with myself and saying, is it time for me to make that jump? And for so long, that answer actually was no. Even after I passed my 4 year deadline, the answer was no until in the middle of 2020, with COVID and all the time that happened for reflection there, that answer became yes. And the answer was, yes, it is time for you to start taking those next steps. And I was feeling the sense of that chapter closing. And so that's what happened. And then, ended up leaving Google, took 3 months off. Basically, I left Google just saying, I don't know what my next chapter is going to look like, but I'm just going to take 3 months off and do nothing and just kind of chill and, learn about the sustainability industry and really just sort of reset on life and all of the habits and patterns and mindsets I've been getting into, and then I'll figure it out from there.
So let me ask you a
So
couple of questions based off of that. And the
yeah.
first thing that really popped in my head is what changed besides the pandemic that you're like, okay, you know what? Now is the right time. Did something in the workplace change? Did your mindset change? Was there a moment that was the aha moment?
Yeah, great question. So I would say it was mostly due to COVID. So I'll tell you, before I sort of had this plan, I thought I had it all figured out. And I think maybe some people can relate to this, where my boyfriend Forrest, we had this plan where we were going to work until September 2021 at our existing jobs. Then we were going to leave and we were going to go travel for a year. So we are going to take a full sabbatical year, live in different places around the world. And then I was like, okay, I'll travel for a year. I'll come back. I'll go to grad school for sustainability. I'll apply beforehand. I'll defer. So I'll just have it waiting for me. Then once I get back, I'll go to grad school and then I'll go into a sustainability job down the line. So I was like, here's my trajectory. And then when COVID happened, as we were seeing how long this pandemic was going to drag on for, I eventually realized, like, we don't know what the world is going to look like in 2021 in September, right?
Yeah.
And I can't just sit around and wait for the world to go back to normal so I can live this life plan that I thought I, had everything figured out for. I have to start taking steps now in the direction that I want to move in. And, obviously for me, that direction was sustainability. So I was like, okay, I have to start making moves now. What does that look like? So that was one, I think, just coming to a recognition that
Mhm.
it was starting to be the right time to take matters into my own hands and sort of, instead of playing to that victim mindset.
Yeah, and I think a lot
Um,
of people probably have the same mindset if they're reevaluating their whole life. Do I still want to do that 9 to 5 job, or do I want to try to find something where it's more my passion, or something I can be full-time remote and not have to be in the office every day?
yeah, absolutely. And I think the biggest thing that COVID made us realize is that everything is a choice,
Hmm.
right? So, you see how much is outside of your control, and then you have a choice to either just sort of fall into the trap of feeling like you have no control, therefore you're at the whims of whatever's happening in the world. Or you can say, okay, all of this unexpected stuff has happened, but I have a choice to either make the most out of it or, not. And I think for me, and maybe for a lot of people too, that choice has meant figuring out what is important to them. And like you said, what are the key things that they want out of life, and then actually finding the courage to go out and chase after that.
Yeah, and you made the choice
Um,
to leave Google. What was the reception between your family, friends, people in your life when you're like, I'm just gonna take 3 months and figure it out?
yeah. Well, at first I thought, okay, let me give myself until the end of 2020 to find a new job in sustainability. And I was thinking this starting in about July. Um, and eventually just realized that sustainability is such a large field that I really wanted some time to explore what
Mhm.
sustainability actually means, what sector of sustainability I wanted to go into. I mean, I wanted to be super intentional about it because I didn't want to make the same mistake, or quote unquote mistake, because not, things aren't really mistakes, but I didn't want to be in a situation where I, jump into the next step, rushing into it. And then once I get there, then again realized, oh no, this is not the
Mm,
area that I want to be in, right?
mhm.
So once I realized that there's so much discovery for me within sustainability, there were so many books I wanted to read, people I wanted to talk to, events I wanted to attend. That's when I decided, okay, I'm going to quit and I'm just going to take 3 months off and do nothing, or learn about sustainability, but also not really do that much at first. And I think, among my friends were super, super supportive because they had known that I've been wanting to do this for a while. And I'm so grateful for their support because I was dealing with a ton of fear around making this decision. I was dealing with fear. I was feeling guilty. I was feeling like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I'm actually capable of doing this. And their support really helped me through that. I would say among my family, my parents, obviously, they're my parents. And so
Yeah.
they were thinking, you have this amazing job at Google, why leave? Why don't you like at least figure out your next step? But I think deep down, I just knew that I needed that time off. And I will say now, being on the other side of it, I actually accepted a job offer as of last week or maybe 2 weeks ago, but it took me from when I left. Thank you
A round of
for the
applause if you can't see
applause.
the
Thank
video.
you. Yeah, from when I left until when I accepted the job offer was basically exactly 6 months. And I was home at the time in Portland where my family is. I was spending 3 weeks with them. And so they actually were witness to the end stages of my interviewing cycles, the final rounds and then the offers and yeah, and actually accepting the offer. And so I hope that it was a really fun experience for them too, just to see that when, if I have a really deep sense of trust in myself, my capability to achieve something I want, that, for my parents, it's okay. Like you can relax a bit. I got it covered, right?
And can we get an excuse from Leap of Fate? Where did you sign your offer with?
Yeah, so I signed an offer with this company called Afresh. Um, I found out about them through a Slack group that I joined called Work on Climate. And basically, Afresh is a company that's leveraging AI to reduce food waste in grocery stores. So, in grocery stores, well, actually, let me backtrack a little bit. If your listeners don't know this, 1/3 of all food waste, or 1/3 of all food produced in the US is wasted.
Oh my
So,
God.
that's a huge
That's a
percentage.
massive
Yeah.
number.
1/3. And Project Drawdown is a book that rates all of the different solutions to climate change. And depending on the scenarios and the data that they use, reducing food waste is the number one solution. It's either number one or it's within the top five. And I had realized that I wanted to go into food sustainability when I was doing all of my research. So 1/3 of all the food produced is wasted, and then 40% of the food waste in the US happens at the retail level. And so that's, grocery stores, restaurants, et cetera. And so within grocery stores, the way that the current system looks is there's, really robust ordering systems for packaged goods, but not really something that exists for fresh food. So that's around the perimeters
Mm.
of the grocery store. I think fruits, vegetables, meats, etc. And the way it's done right now is literally a store manager walks around with pen and paper and he counts the apples and then he says, okay, I have 10 apples left and I think that we're going to need, 50 more or whatever. And so he just writes down order 50 apples based on his intuition.
That's very old school. Very old school.
Right, right. And as you can imagine, it relies on personal experience, but there is a margin for error. And so what Afresh does is they have this AI software system that takes all of the historical data and it says, based on historical sales data, here's how much food you should order to minimize waste. They've only been around since 2017, but they've reduced already, I think, 5 million pounds of food waste, which is incredible.
Amazing.
And yeah, every pound of food waste reduced also improves the bottom line for the grocery stores, increases food access. And so there's just a lot of upsides to solving for that. So yeah, I'll be joining them. I'm so excited about it. And I'm joining as the customer success lead. So I'll be helping build out the structure for managing all of their large retail clients, which is a perfect transition of skills from Google, where I was managing all of our advertising clients. So yeah, it all
This,
worked out.
it worked out well. And I'm sure they're happy to have you and your talents because like, oh my God, as we try to scale and really grow, you being at Google and managing so much bigger clients, you have a skill set they need. And obviously you're so interested in the mission that they have the backing that you want to have for yourself.
Yeah, yeah, and that's why I'm so happy because, the entire time at Google, there was a sense of uncertainty, right? Where I just had this feeling, I was like, I think the sustainability industry is going to need any kind of skills that they can get, right? Because it's an
Hmm.
entirely new industry. So you need salespeople, you need marketing, you need tech, you need whatever. It's not just going to be a bunch of engineers solving for climate change. Um, but there were still moments of doubt, right? Where it's like, okay, am I really developing skills that they're going to want? And so now that, as you said, I'm able to join this company and bring the things I've learned from Google, I'm just so like, you see the closing of the closing on that circle, right? You're like, oh, it all makes sense now looking back. And I think it can only make sense looking back, but it's
Yeah.
great to be here.
Yeah, and it's just really rewarding because, like you said, you put so much work in reading books, Slack groups, probably articles and whatnot, and you found the niche that you wanted to be in, which was food sustainability, and you found the right company that fits your mission, your morals, your ideals, and your backing of all your what you've done in school and Google. So it's a full circle, and like for me, it's rewarding as your friend to hear you like smile and see you so happy and know that like you're now pursuing your passions, which is everything about leap of fate. Is you took that fate into your own hands and you made it happen, versus a lot of people probably have been like, I'm at Google, whatever, I'll try to just figure it out. But no, you made that leap actually happen, which is what we preach here all the time.
Yeah, yeah. And I think anyone can do it as well too, right? So I'm just, I'm hoping that some of the things I learned along the way will help other people, maybe if they're still in that phase of, I don't really know where I want to go, or maybe it's I know where I want to go, but I'm really scared of going there.
Yeah.
If I can do it, anyone can do it.
Yeah, and which is a great segue to the four topics we're going to talk about, which is intuition, fear, comfortability with ambiguity, and then don't undersell
Mhm,
yourself. So let's talk. Let's start with the first one because it's a great segue. Is you developed a healthy relationship with intuition, and you
mhm.
said you had this intuition for sustainability. You had this intuition that Google wasn't the right place, even though it's a great place to be, but wasn't for you. So how did you deal with that intuition? Like a lot of, did you have to lose sleep over it? You talked to Forrest, your family, and how did you come to the grip? You're like, you know what? I can't just let this intuition be in the back of my head. I want to really pursue what this is.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the first thing to developing your intuition is you have to actually get comfortable listening to that voice inside of you, because
Very true.
it's very easy to just push it to the wayside or ignore it, or let the voices of people around you or the culture around you influence what it is you think you want. But I think, if you listen hard enough, that everyone will know deep down something that they really want to achieve in this lifetime. And it's about making space to listen to that voice. So, in terms of developing a healthy relationship with your intuition, I would say a mindfulness practice is first and foremost. And I know
Mm.
you've talked about mindfulness meditation on your
Yep.
podcast. I feel very lucky to have discovered mindfulness when I was in college. I was a neuroscience major in college, so I was just, very geeky about brain stuff, and I'd read books about the brain. And then I discovered this concept of mindfulness. I read this book called The Power of Now, which was my first foray into it. And it just completely shifted my perspective, like recognizing that your thoughts are not necessarily the truth and that they're just your thoughts happening, allows you to develop a healthier relationship with
Hmm.
them. And when you have that healthier relationship, then you can start to find the space in between those thoughts, right? Because our brains are just thought generating machines, always one after the other. But when you start to practice mindfulness, you start to realize that there's spaces in between these thoughts. And by creating that space is where you create the room for insight. Um, so I would say, that's one first and foremost. I know Randy has an episode on
Multiple.
meditation, and yeah,
Multiple.
yeah. And so if you are not familiar with this at all, I definitely recommend checking out some of his episodes on that.
Yeah, and just to put those out there, it would be episode
Yeah,
1 with Aware Apparel, Sean Leventon, and then in episode 13, we did intro to meditation and Aware update. And in that intro to meditation, we do a 10-minute guided meditation. So if you've never meditated before, it's a great way to just learn about it and get into it and practice mindfulness.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's the first one. I think mindfulness is the foundation for all of this, for a healthy practice of tuning into your intuition, for a healthy practice of self-examination, for looking at your fears and figuring out what you're going to do about them. Like mindfulness is going to help with all of that. And it also carries you through the ups and downs. Like when you are in those phases of really intense uncertainty or a ton of self-doubt, mindfulness reminds you that this is just temporary and that this is just something you're experiencing right now and it will also pass.
Yeah, I
Um,
agree. And it gives you an
yeah.
opportunity to just sit there, block out your cell phone, block out the TV, block out the noise around you, and just be one with
Hmm.
yourself. And when you come out of the mindfulness meditation, again, when some people think of meditation mindfulness, it's like kumbaya, you're super deep, 3 hours sitting cross-legged. No, it's just a place to give yourself the opportunity to think about yourself, as Julie is saying, and just understand where your brain's at, your mind's at, your heart's at. And you come out of it, you just have more clarity because you don't have all these other exterior factors surrounding your thoughts in that moment.
Yeah, yeah, beautifully said, Randy.
Thank
Yeah,
you. Thank you.
yeah. Um, and then the second thing I think that has really helped me a lot in the past 6 months is journaling. So, I had sort of journaled before, like on and off, but I really leaned into it over the past 6 months. Is just a way of making space to ask myself the really hard questions. Because, you know, when someone asks you offhand, like, oh, what do you want your life to look like in 10 years? Like, you probably don't have an answer, right? But like if you sit down and you ask yourself that question and you think about it and you write about it, and your writing can even be like, I don't really know, but here's some things that I think I know. And you sit on it, digest it, come back to it, a couple days later, rethink through it, rewrite on that. I think journaling is a really, really powerful tool for clarifying that vision because you'll write down things that you think you want in a given moment and then come back a week or two later and you're like, actually, no, that's not true, but I realized something else since then. And it also helps you hold yourself accountable, right? If you start writing
Mhm.
down, like, these are the qualities that I want in my future job, or these are the things that I want my life to look like, then when you're again in that state of, I'm a little confused, I don't really know, you can remember to that journaling exercise you wrote to yourself and you can say, like, oh, like at this moment, I knew that this is what I wanted. And so it's a great process of both identifying things that you want and also I call it like a whittling away of recognizing what it is you don't want. So it's sort of like, when we think about the funnel, right? I know we use this diagram in sales a lot, but it's like a funnel for
Yeah.
yourself and your vision. It's like you just throw all the ideas out there and you add in ideas, you take away ideas, and you slowly get clearer and clearer on, what that main North Star is going to look like for you. And one exercise that I taught mindfulness workshops at Google, and one exercise that we did that I've really leaned heavily on is this envisioning exercise. And I've done it now in different variations and forms. But if you've never done it before, basically the question is, if everything in my life meets or exceeds my greatest expectations, what will my life look like in 5 years?
Mm.
And the
It's a
key
deep
to
question.
answering this, yeah, the key to answering this is to focus on things that you can influence when you're within your life. So it's not like, oh, I win the lottery tomorrow and then I have $5 million and then my life 5 years from now is going to be great, right? But it's more around like things that you actually are able to, do within your own sphere of control, and you write this answer to this question as if you're in the present tense living 5 years from now. So you would say something like, if I'm writing it, I'm saying like, I am working in a sustainability related career. I'm in food sustainability. Like, I live in a house with a backyard and a garden, like whatever it is that you want to write in your life. Um, and the reason that this works is because our brains act as prediction machines. And so, what we don't realize about our brain is that it's taking our past historical experiences and saying, okay, this is what happened in my life in the past. Based on this, I'm going to predict this is what's going to happen in the future because it's what you know, right? And none of us can tell the future and we don't know. And so, our brain has to take this historical data and sort of project out what it thinks it's going to look like. But the issue is that a lot of this happens unconsciously. And so you might be holding yourself back in a way of not even recognizing it. So if you can make that unconscious predictions conscious and then also use it to your advantage by fully envisioning yourself living your ideal life 5 years from now, you're writing it in the present tense as if you're already there. It's almost a way of tricking your brain and telling your brain, hey, like this is actually possible. I am capable of achieving this. And so this exercise I've done multiple times, sometimes like I'll even do it just for the near future. Like before I embarked on my sabbatical, I wrote to myself an envisioning statement of what I wanted my sabbatical to look like and what I wanted to feel within my sabbatical, the things that I wanted to be doing with my time. And again, anytime during my sabbatical, if I was like, oh, I feel really lost and uncertain and I feel like I'm wasting my time, it's like, let me go back to this envisioning statement. Let me remember why I gave myself this period of time off and like really come back to, what is the intent and the purpose of this? So, yeah, again, to summarize that, mindfulness and then also really leveraging journaling to get clear on your internal voice and use that as a tool for guiding yourself in the direction of your dreams and where you want to go.
I love that. And how many pages or how many books and journals did you go through?
I think I finished one and then I'm halfway through another one.
That's pretty
So
good.
it's not, yeah, I don't really have like a dedicated time I sit down and write. I think some people really thrive on that. They get up in the morning and they write a couple pages and they just brain dump onto the paper. For me, I use it when I don't feel clear on my vision, and then I'll just like use journaling, just sort of like I have so many entries where I was like, I don't really know what I want in my future job. Like I literally write this. I don't really know what I want in my future job, but here's some things that I think I want. And I'll just list those out. I'm like, okay, feel a little bit better now. And then come back to it a couple weeks later and say, oh, like, here's some other things that I've realized I think I want.
And that's good. And then you can tie them together and be like, here's a common theme between 2 weeks ago, 2 days ago, 3 months
Yeah.
time ago. And then you're like, okay, cool. These are the type of things I want to look for in the job description or in a company. And I think you made another good
Yeah.
point. A lot of successful people say they journal when they wake up. First thing they do, anything in their head, they jot it down. And the night before they go to bed, they jot it down. So that way they make sure, as you said, subconsciously, they don't lose it. And they're like, oh my God, what did I think about 2 days ago? Because we've all been there. What I personally
Yeah.
do is I put everything on my mirror in my bathroom. I have a
Ah,
whiteboard marker and I put everything in the mirror like, you're going to be successful today. Your goal is this today. Your XYZ is this today. So that way, whenever I wake up, the first thing I see is that. Whenever I go to bed, brush my teeth, last
yeah.
thing I see that. And it just kind of stays with me. So it's not like journaling, but the same type of concept.
Yeah, you're writing little mantras to yourself,
Yeah.
which I love. It's just great. It's little like pings, little
Yeah.
reminders, and every
You're
time
the
you go into the
MVP.
bathroom, you're
You're
like,
number one. Best podcast
exactly.
ever. So I think that's a good segue because you also said, like you don't know what the future is going to hold, but you kind of want to be there, and people fear what the future may hold and what it could come with. So then the topic two we want to talk about was IDing fears, overcoming them. So I'll let you talk, and then I have some good stuff to add about that as well.
Ooh, great. Yeah. Yeah. So obviously, anytime you're going to make a big jump in your life, there is a lot of fear associated with that,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I recently read something too that I thought was, it was really insightful. And it said that everyone wants change in their life, but what they forget is that if there is a change, there has to be a loss.
Mm.
And we forget that we want change, but we don't want that loss. And so when I read this, I was like, oh, that's so true. And usually what we're fearing is that sense of loss. And so it's just a good reminder, kind of like a holistic perspective. Like if there's going to be change, there will be loss. It's okay. Just accept that, right? That is part of the process.
Mm-hmm.
But when we, think about fears, so when I was, figuring out how to leave Google, I realized I had all these fears, and I hired one of my friends who was becoming a career coach to help me get over these. And so I'm, so grateful to her first for support. But I would say, first and foremost, like it's okay to get support around your fears. Sometimes we think that we
Mm-hmm.
have to deal with them all ourselves, but that's what your community is for. That's what your friends are for, your family or external support, right? And she helped me make that decision that I was almost too scared to make myself. And one of the biggest learnings from her is that your fears are usually these false beliefs. You're believing that, if this, then that, and the then that is usually the worst case scenario. But it's not the truth, right? It's just a false belief that your brain is tuning into. And what she called these is the voice of saboteurs. And
Mm.
so, for example, a saboteur would be, for me, it was like, oh, if I leave Google, I'm never going to find the same caliber of people again to work with, like the same kind of kind, compassionate, funny, dedicated people. And that's a saboteur, that's a false belief, right? That's totally not true, but it's a fear that I have. And so it's around identifying what are these saboteurs, these voices that you have. I had another one. It was like, if I leave Google, then I'm letting down my entire team because then they have to take on the work that I've left behind and it's going to be really hard on them and they're going to hate me, etc. Um, Obviously not true, but that's really how I felt. And so, this kind of goes back to journaling, but really like thinking through what are these key fears that I have, writing them down. And once you write them down on paper, then they seem tangible. Then they're not just like these
Abstract
spirals that you
ideas.
sort of,
Yeah.
yeah. And if they're an abstract idea, you have a tendency to spiral into them in your mind and just dig yourself deeper and deeper into a hole. And then your emotions get brought into it. And it's just like this, this self-fulfilling sort of cycle. But if you write them down, then you get a little bit of distance from them, right? And you recognize, okay, like these are the fears I have. And once you have those fears, then you can find tangible ways to solve for them. So, like I said, one of them is seeking external support through your friends or coaching or whatever it is. One of them is just finding practical ways to address this. So, one of my fears was around leaving Google and spending through all my savings, right? And I was like, oh, like, I don't really know, that sounds really scary. So it's like, okay, what can I do to address that? Well, I have a ton of friends that left Google, and I in fact have friends that left Google and also did sabbaticals. Let me just talk to them and see
Hmm.
what their experience was like and how they, handled that. And I talked to all of them, and they're all saying things like it was the best decision I ever made. One of them's like, yeah, like I have a couple thousand less dollars in my savings account, but so what? I can always make more money, but that time that I gave myself, I'm never going to get that back. And the learnings that I learned from that and like the realizations I had, that never would have come to me if I had stayed at Google, if I didn't spend that time and that money. So that's, another way of addressing those. And, I would say like one of my third fears too was around just the practical aspects of having a job, like health insurance,
Yep.
whatnot. And it's like, okay, like once I write it down, well, then it just becomes a checklist of things to address, right? Okay, like I'm scared of not having money. Great, let me figure out how much money I need to save up or how much money I need to set aside. And that's just going to be the amount of money that I spend. And once I run through that, then, then I'll hopefully have found a job by then,
Yeah.
right?
Not
Or
going
it's like,
clubbing at a 5 a.m. on a Monday night.
exactly right. No, I was not doing that for sure. I was sleeping. But it's like, I'm scared I'm not going to have health insurance. Okay, well, I can obviously figure that out, right? I can either buy it or I ended up getting it through my partner. But, all of these fears, I would say it feels so scary when it's in your head. But if you can get it down on paper and then like almost turn it into a to-do list of things to address, I think you'll generally find a way to address those fears. And of course, last but not least, like just again, going back to the lean on your community for support, find people to talk to who you can trust, because they also will give you sometimes the tough love that you need when your fears are not valid. Like,
Yeah.
I'll say one thing for Forrest, right? He would say to me, because I was so scared of leaving Google and I felt like I was abandoning my work family and all this stuff. And he would just remind me, like, Google is a corporation. And as much as you love the people that you work with, in terms of revenue and like your impact, you are also a cog in the wheel.
Yeah.
And sometimes that I needed to hear that, right? And it's not that either perspective is right or wrong or better or worse than the other, but they're both true. And you sometimes just need people to sort of give you the push that you need to go in that, to take that step that you're maybe too scared to take yourself.
Yeah. And they can see it from a different perspective because you have one silo and someone's like, well, you're so
Yeah.
right. But from this outside perspective, you might not think about this is how it could be. And like, I had so much to talk about this, but you literally hit every point I was going to make because I went through the same thing with me. So
Wait,
the one
Randy,
point,
tell me more.
so
Yeah.
the one thing I'll say is like when I left Cisco to go to Neat A/B testing, and I found the CEO of Neat A/B testing found me on the app Clubhouse. Everybody was putting fears in my head. You met somebody once over an app, you're gonna go work for him. How big's the company? You leave Cisco's 401k, Cisco insurance, all that goes with it. And the outside forces were actually making me second guess my decision because of like we think you're making a bad decision. But going
Mm,
back to point number one, my intuition was I knew I was making the right decision for
mhm,
myself in making sure that I could continue to grow my career and do things that I wanted to do. That they went back to putting the stuff on the whiteboard, like, this is what you've talked about. You have to trust yourself. Yeah, maybe like the decision may become out terrible, but no risk, no reward. And 3 months later, I ended up getting let go from the company. So maybe it wasn't the best decision in that limelight. But I look at everything as a half glass full. And like you said,
yeah.
this past 3 months, the summer has been the best 3 months I've had in so long. Just being able to
Oh,
like
amazing.
recoup myself, surf, work out, hang out with friends, live in San Diego, and I feel refreshed. So wherever I want to go next, I feel like I'm ready to go and hit the ground running. Where before that, I was running down. If I never left for that job, I still probably be at Cisco and having these same doubts and feelings that
Mhm.
that wouldn't be where I'm at today.
Yeah. Yeah, and, like, even you letting go from getting let go from that company isn't necessarily a failure or a indication that it was a bad decision that you made, right?
Yep.
Because you learned so much through that journey, you pushed yourself so much, and you got something completely different out of life that you wouldn't have gotten if you had stayed at Cisco, and, even just talking to you now, like, I'm so happy to hear about how happy you are, and
Look
it
at the
was that
smile.
sense of intuition. Yeah, it was that sense of intuition yourself. Someone could be looking in externally and they'd be like, "Oh, I told Randy not to leave and he left and now look what happened."
Yeah.
But they're not living your life. Like they're not experiencing that same sense of joy or fulfillment or the sense of learning and achievement that you're experiencing. And so I'm so glad that
Yeah.
it's yeah, that you had that experience.
Yeah, and the other thing that you brought up as well is like savings. Like my parents, like, you, what about your like stocks, your savings? Like, oh, what are you gonna do?
Mhm.
I was like, isn't that what it's for? It's like there to be there if I ever need to use it. I'm not gonna take my money to the
Right.
grave. So yeah, maybe I'm spending a little bit more money than I have in the past because I don't have money coming in. Fair enough,
Yeah.
but that's why you build up money so that way you have a situation like this. So
Right.
it's been
Right.
all really good, and that's what made me comfortable as we move to point number three with ambiguity. Was I went into this whole new adventure not knowing anything about being a chief revenue officer, working at a
Mhm.
startup, and honestly that ambiguity excited me so much more because, as you just said, I knew I was going to see myself grow in so many different ways that I couldn't at a corporation, having to do everything from the beginning, do everything yourself, meet new people.
Mhm.
And those 3 months of ambiguity were definitely tough. There were definitely stressful days when this was like,
Yeah.
I miss having that safety net of a Google, of a Cisco. But at the same time, I would go to bed at night and be like, oh my God, I figured out the problem. I figured out the situation. And I could wake up the next morning knowing I'm a better person because of it. I'm sure you felt the same
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. Or you have those moments like the spark of inspiration that maybe you wouldn't have had if you were doing the same routine over and over again. Like,
Yeah,
and it's
I agree.
so exciting to get those, where you just feel like you get a little download. You're like, oh my gosh, it all makes sense now. Like you're
Yeah.
digging through
Light
the
bulb,
mud for a
light bulb,
while.
light
Yeah.
bulb.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, and yeah, so kind of like going into that third theme around being comfortable with ambiguity, I think the biggest thing is developing a sense of trust in the bigger picture. And that is going to help you recognize that being in a phase of uncertainty is just part of the journey.
Hmm.
Um, you know, kind of talking about mantras, like I don't write my mantras in my mirror, but every so often I'll write it on like a little card or something and I'll just like leave it by my desk. And I wrote one little mantra to myself, like when I was in the middle of my sabbatical, because I think a lot of us always have this wish where we're just like, I just want to know what's going to happen, or like, I wish I had it figured out, right? And I was always like, oh, I just wish like I knew that it would all work out. And surprise, surprise, it did all work out. But at the time, I didn't know it. And so I was like, okay, I was asking myself, like, how can I relate to this uncertainty in a healthier way instead of being so anxious about it or like dreading it or not liking it? It's like, how can I really celebrate it? And so I wrote this little mantra to myself and I wrote, I celebrate uncertainty and I delight in not knowing what comes next. And the reason I wrote that is because I had this realization where I was like, if you know everything that's going to happen, you're never going to be delightfully surprised.
That's
Like there's
true.
never going to be, a fun thing that happens that you didn't expect, and you're not going to get that same level of joy that you get out of that. So it was like, how can I be so excited by this uncertainty? Because it means that there is endless opportunity that could happen. And I just have no idea what. And it's like, can I just be in this space of just being like, woohoo, like, I don't know what's gonna happen, but something great's gonna happen. And so just like really celebrating that. And there's this other quote too that a friend shared with me. I'm gonna pull up and I want to share it too because I think it's so beautiful, and I really came back to this quite often. So it's by the poet Rilke. Maybe you've heard of it. Let me know if you have. So I'll just read it here. And the quote is, "Be patient toward all that is unsolved in your heart, and try to love the questions themselves, like locked rooms and like books that are now written in a very foreign tongue. Do not seek the answers which cannot be given you because you would not be able to live them. And the point is to live everything. Live the questions now. Perhaps you will then gradually, without noticing it, live along some distant day into the answer."
That's really good. That's very deep.
Yeah. Yeah. And I loved it so much because I was like, oh, maybe I'll just live the questions into the answer. Right. And it gives me this mental image of just walking along this journey, and you don't really know where you're going to go. But once you end up there at the end, you're like, oh, then you realize you've arrived. And you look back and you recognize how beautiful and how exciting, and how sort of how confusing the journey might have
Yeah.
been at times, but how much more rewarding it is because you've now arrived where you wanted to be.
Yeah. And a lot of people we've spoken to, again, just connecting themes here, say like, you just got to go in and dive for it. There's going to be bigger. You're
Mm,
not going to figure out the answers. If you try to figure out all the answers before you start, you'll never actually start because you're going to keep reading and learning and learning. So the best is dive in. And then as stuff comes up, you don't know, figure it out. So that way you're doing both at the same time. And that goes back from that
yeah,
financial podcast, the entrepreneurship podcast, meditation, mindfulness podcast, is dive in, let the
yeah,
ambiguity happen, let the fear happen. And as you go along, there will be bumps in the road. You'll be 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, 3 steps forward. But when you get to the end of the road, as Julia said, you'll be so happy, and you'll look back at that person and say, I don't even recognize the person anymore. I can't believe I accomplished it. And I'll continue to move forward and make it happen.
no, absolutely. I mean, Randy, I feel like I've lived a lifetime in the past 6 months. Like I
We
look
all have
back
because
at
of
some of,
COVID.
well, yeah, yeah, exactly. Right. And it's fun with journaling too, because then you can go back and see what your mindset was back then. And I read some of those entries. I'm like, wow, I was dealing with so much uncertainty and so much doubt back then. And I'm just like, holy crap, I've really come through a portal in this short amount of time.
Maybe one day you'll
Um,
turn that into a journal and you'll publish it as like a poems or something like that.
maybe. I know I never thought I'd be a writer, but it's not part of my intuitive voice, but who knows where I'll be 10 years from now.
And we'll put it in the
um
journal. Don't worry.
but one other thing I want to address is you talk about bumps in the road, and I
Mhm.
think that's really important as well, because as you're figuring out your purpose and as you're going towards your purpose, is you will encounter those. And it's really about cultivating a sense of resilience around that. And there's another quote that really helped me get through this. And it's by the spiritual teacher named Gabby Bernstein. And I just was listening to a talk she gave one day, and she said this, and it stuck with me ever since. And the quote is, "Obstacles are a detour in the right direction."
Mm.
And I love this because it's like, usually, like, let's say you think you're going on the right path and then you hit a wall and you're trying to get past that wall and you just can't. And you get so frustrated because, again, you're trying to control your destiny. You're like, this is where I'm supposed to go. Um, the recognizing the obstacles are actually detouring you in the right direction, I think, is around this theme of surrendering to
Mhm.
whatever is happening, or the bumps that are happening in the way, and just being okay with that. And again, having that sense of trust where you're like, okay, like maybe I actually don't know what's best for myself, and maybe I'm not supposed to be going this way. Maybe this is a sign pointing me in another direction. And to your story about how you joined the startup and then you were let go, like, yeah, maybe joining a startup and like doing that and building something from the ground up definitely is within your career path. But maybe you being let go from that was a detour in the right direction. And maybe the right direction was, oh, hey, now you got 3 months to take off
Yeah.
and everything you've gotten out of it. But perhaps at the time it didn't feel that way. And so I do remember that as well, where I'm like, okay, if I'm facing a block in the road, like how can I look at this as a blessing, or like actually as a further form of guidance instead of just something that's stopping me from where I think I'm supposed to go.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, because when people see obstacles, as you just said, they think it's the end of the road, but that just makes there's another 5 avenues you have to go figure out. And as you said, like, I haven't been this happy in the past 3 months, and I just feel mentally, physically like the healthiest I've been. And if I didn't have
Hmm.
the opportunity to just have a sabbatical myself and take that time off, I'm not saying go quit your job today, but I think everybody in their life needs an opportunity to reset. If that's taking
Yeah.
vacations, which you can't do right now because you can't travel, if that's having a couple of weeks off of work where you can do it, I think we're starting to see employers are allowing this type of employee happiness because there's so much competition out there. They need employees to be at their best to be able to work for them. And two, they're going to leave them to go somewhere else where they can get a better employee experience.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Which I think, as we round third base, is a good segue to number four, which is don't undersell yourself. As we just, because employees now see the worth. It's not, hey, I have to work for a company and be stuck there. No, I'm the talent. The company needs me. So now I'm worth more. And I want to go to a company that can provide me what I want. If that's work remotely, if that's having childcare for parents, if that's
Hmm.
being able to take a month vacation, 2 month vacations, food at the office, all that goes with it. So Julia, tell us about how you make sure you don't undersell yourself and you get the worth that you think
Hmm.
you deserve.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, so I guess I'll start just by telling a story of when I realized that I struggle with this, as I think a lot of people do, and I think especially women do. And so, any ladies in the audience, like this is all, a lot for you guys, but also for the men out there. Um, I was putting together my resume for applying to jobs, and I obviously haven't written a resume since I started at Google. And so I'm like starting from scratch, right? And I was writing the executive summary, and I was like, something professional with 5+ years experience in strategic partnerships. And I was like writing out all the things that I did. And then I found this job I wanted to apply to. And I remember the job description said that it wanted 6 to 10 years in partnerships experience. So I was like, okay, like this job wants 6 to 10 years. I was like, oh, my resume says 5+ years. Like that's close enough, right? Like they'll probably
Yeah,
accept me, right?
semantics.
Yeah. And then it wasn't until a couple days later where I was like, Julia, you were at Google for 6 years. Like you were at Google for a full 6 years. And I was like, why are you writing 5+ years on your resume? And it's because I realized, like, when I worked at Google the first year, I was working with small and medium businesses. And then the next 5 years, I was working with C-level executives at different advertising companies. And so I just discounted the first year. I was like, oh, the first year I was at Google doesn't really count. So,
Mm,
only the last 5 years were really strategic. So I'm just going to write 5+ years. And I was like, no, no, no. Like you have done you have 6 years of experience. You need to put that on your resume. And so it was just kind of like an eye-opening experience for me. And what it reminded me of is this exercise that we ran at Google, and it was this workshop that people could take, and it was called I Am Remarkable. And basically, what it was a workshop around helping people claim their accomplishments. And again, like women typically struggle more with this than men do, but I think people of all shapes and colors and sizes and whatever suffer from this. And what it is we feel bad about claiming our accomplishments because we feel like it's boasting, we feel like it's bragging, we don't want to come off as narcissistic, etc.
mhm.
But really what I Am Remarkable was teaching is the concept that it's not boasting if it's a fact, right?
Yeah.
I'm not bragging if it's a fact that I worked at Google for 6 years. I do have 6 years experience. I'm not bragging if I said I did, 150% in sales revenue target, whatever, if that is actually a fact. And so the exercise that they have you go through in small groups is you write down, I am remarkable because, and then you write down all of these facts about things that you have done in your life or in your career or whatever it is. It doesn't just have to be about job. It could be, your personal hobbies or how you are as a friend or a family member, etc. And you just write all of this down, and then, you go around in that small group afterwards and you read these aloud. And it's so fascinating because when you're listening to other people read theirs, it's like, oh my gosh, these people are incredible. Like they've done so many things, right? And then you offer them that level of admiration and that level of pride, but you so rarely give that to yourself. And then when it comes around to you, you're reading yours, you're like, wait, like I've done all these amazing things. Like, holy crap, I am a pretty incredible person. But so often we just forget that. And so I think, that's a big one for anyone who, let's say, is struggling with a sense of self-worth, or you feel like you're not, like, you don't have XYZ or whatever it takes. Like, goes back to the journaling exercise. Make time for things like this. Make time to sit down and like document why you're remarkable, all the incredible things you've done. And it doesn't even have to be things you've done. It could just be who you are, right? It could be, I
Mhm.
am remarkable because I'm a great friend and I'm a great listener, for example. And it's so helpful to remind yourself of that. And yeah, I guess, that's the big one that I'll say on remembering your sense of self-worth and not underselling yourself.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Is like people are afraid of like, oh, I hit President's Club 3 times a year. Oh, I was able to do this. And like I've gone through some interview processes, which I'll talk about in a future episode. And
Mhm.
I've had a couple people be like, you're so confident in what you talk, but it's not coming off as you're bragging. It's just you had these accomplishments and you're explaining how you made them happen and the results and
Yeah.
why that's it big. And people respect that. Now, if you come off and you're like, yo, I'm the best person ever, why? I'm just the best. Okay, now it's a brag. Like, but if you're like, yo, I hit my number 150%. No, I was out
Yeah.
there doing training calls, calling people, and you explain the backing. It gives them the confidence to know that you are talking about and like believing what you've done and you've actually proved it. So you're able to go out
Hmm.
there and be successful. Now, obviously, on the resume,
Yeah.
it's a bit harder when it's only numbers. What I suggest to people is like Julia says she didn't do anything for 6 years. And okay, what have I done the past 6 years? What are my accomplishments? Here at Leap of Fate, we recommend that you should update your resume every 3 months. And even if that means you add one line
Wow.
to it, you update it every 3 months. So that way, the past 3 months, your accomplishments are added to there. You can take stuff off you don't need. And if you ever get to a time where you need to actually have your resume, so having to try to figure out, go back, you already have it ready to go. And it takes you an
Hmm.
hour on the weekend, hour at night to just go through what are my accomplishments. How do I add this up? Did I learn any new skills the past 3 months I can add? Any new types of achievements? And that way you keep it up to
Yeah.
date all the time. Add it to your LinkedIn too. It's really smart.
Yeah. 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 And I would also add to that, you know, I think like in general, the best kind of investment you can make is in yourself, is in your own learning and your own development.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say for like figuring out my sense of worth and stuff, also when I was interviewing and when I was like going through negotiations, I hired one of my friends who's also a career coach. Apparently I have amazing friends, including you, Randy.
Stop
But
it.
I hired her to coach me on that. And that's an investment I'm making in myself. And so I think when you're developing your sense of self-worth, that's also something to remember. I would just say the best kind of investment you can make is one that you're making in yourself, in your own learning, in your own growth, in your own, emotional, mental, spiritual, physical health, whatever it is. That will also set the foundation for just developing the sense of worth, of knowing that you're worth it. And I think that is something that will shape every aspect of your life if you remember that.
I love that. And then I think this is the final thing you would talk about was Ikigai. Can you talk about that a little bit? 'Cause I think it plays a part into this.
Ooh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, Ikigai is this concept that someone introduced to me a couple years ago, and I love it because ever since I discovered it, I was like, wow, this really is like the holistic framework I was looking for. So what Ikigai is, it's a Japanese term, and it loosely translates into a concept around your reason for being, or waking up to joy.
Hmm.
And it's a philosophical perspective. So basically is describing a lifestyle that's trying to balance both the spiritual and the practical side of everything that's going to bring you fulfillment and purpose in your life. Um, so what it is, it's a Venn diagram of 4 different circles. And the 4 circles are: number 1, what are you good at? Number 2, what brings you, or what you love? And I look at that as what brings you joy. Number 3, what the world needs. and number 4, what you can be paid for. And I feel like because I invested so much time in, my own development, and also in just getting really clear on my vision and figuring out what it is I wanted, and then actually finding a job that met all of those aspects, I look at Ikigai now and I'm so happy because I'm like, holy crap, like I discovered the center of that Venn diagram, at least in terms of what it looks like in my life right now. And I never thought I would be able to get there. Oh, thank you so much,
Here we
Randy.
go.
This is great.
This is the beauty of
Yeah.
Zoom, baby.
Wow, technology. I
Let
love
me
it.
let me see if I can move this over a little bit. We'll move it up a little bit so
Oh,
we can see each
oh
other.
my
There we go.
gosh.
Perfect. So
How fun. How
you
fun.
can
Yeah.
you can see what she's talking about with mission, vocation, profession, passion. You get the middle, you have the Ikigai, and that's what Julia says she's all about. Or found, excuse me.
Exactly. Yeah, because the thing is I think in the past, when you're listening to different career advice, sometimes it's like, your career should be what you're passionate about, or your career should be like what the world needs. It always felt like something was missing for me. And you can see in these different intersections of the Venn diagram that if you have 2 things, like 2 out of the 3 circles, or 2 out of the 4 circles, or 3 out of the 4 circles, that you're getting something. Like if you combine what you're good at with what you love, you get passion, right? If you combine what you love with what the world needs, you get mission. But you're still missing certain pieces.
Mhm.
If you combine what you're good at with what you love with what the world needs, then you get this delight and this fullness in your life, but you have no wealth. And I think sometimes people think, oh, in order to make a difference in the world, I have to be dirt poor. And I definitely thought that was sustainability. I was like, in order to care about sustainability, I'm gonna have to be poor and whatever it is. But then when you add in all of these pieces together, then you're like, oh, these are all the things that I have to look at in order to find what my Ikigai is. And I just really love how wholesome it feels, like how it feels like to me when I look at this, that there's not something missing, that I don't feel like I'm giving up something in order to live a life of fulfillment.
And everyone who says the job I work isn't a job, I'm just doing what I love, they're at the center of the Ikigai. So if you're not there and you're still listening to this podcast, I know we're about an hour in and we're probably people maybe have dropped off a bit. However, I think this is the most important part. If you can get to this point where you're in the middle of the Ikigai, you've made your life and you'll never want to leave that job again because it won't feel like a job to you. If you're in one of those circles,
Yeah.
take a second, journal, put something on the whiteboard, look at yourself, meditate, mindfulness, get a therapist, talk to a coach, whatever that may be, and figure out how you can turn yourself from 2 circles, 3 circles, and get yourself in that middle equilibrium. And then you'll be the most successful and happy you've ever been.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
what a great ending.
Such an inspiring note to end on, Randy. I
I
love
know.
it.
So, Juliet, thank you so much for coming on today. Can I give you this quick 1 minute for a final thought to recap what you talked about today and you think the biggest key thoughts for people to take away with are?
Sure. I think what I'll leave people with is is I truly feel like when you are fully being authentic to yourself, that doors will start to open for you. And it doesn't feel that way. Maybe it feels like you're closing a door behind you and it's the end of an entire world you knew. But if you are truly following your mission and your purpose and your intuition on what it is that you want to bring to the world, what the world needs, what you love and what you're good at, and you're combining all of those into this Ikigai, and you're following that, then the opportunities will start to show up and people will help you get there. And so I would just remind everyone to have a sense of trust in that, even when it feels really scary and uncertain, and know that it will work out if you're being true to yourself.
I love that. And I think Julia embodies what you just said. If we go back to the 4 things, she developed a healthy relationship with intuition. She knew she had a plan. The plan kind of fell off a bit because of COVID and went longer than she expected, the 4 years or 6 years, but she always stayed with the intuition and knew when the intuition was telling her it was the right time. She took the leap of faith and left Google. She had the fear, what happens after I leave Google? I don't know what sustainability to go to. What about my savings? Things like that. And she overcame that by diving into learning, diving into different podcasts, diving into reading, diving into journaling. And that helped her overcome the fears, understand where she stands, what she still needs to learn so she can move herself forward to the future, which is where she became comfortable with ambiguity, point number 3, because she didn't know what the future held, but she knew what her intuition was, what her passion was, where she wanted her Ikigai to be. And she was getting to that point through her learning, through sabbatical, and being able to get to point number 4. She knew her worth. She knew she wanted to work for a sustainable food company. She found the right company. She was able to go through the process. She was able to learn how to negotiate a contract and put all the 4 points together to now where she's at that Ikigai in the middle, right there. Where's my finger? Wrong way. Right there. There we go. And she's there. And you can tell based off her smile, based off the whole talk today, she's been through a lot. She's really happy. And her next 6 months, 12 months, 24 months down the road, she's going to be absolutely killing it, making a change in the world in sustainability. So I usually don't say this in the podcast, but I really love what Julia's talked about in the story. And I think she's one of the guests that I'm invested in because I want to continue to follow up with her. So we'll bring Julia back. When do you start your job, Julia?
I start September 13th.
September 13th. So we'll probably bring her back early to mid 2022 when she's been in there a little bit and she can talk about, this is everything I talked about on the podcast. This is what I thought was, now this is actually how the job has gone. This is the differences we've made. And this is what I've learned. And now I can go back and say, hey, the whole process is worth it. So we'll get Julia on for a follow-up in 6 to 12 months when she has more to follow up with and the job's going great. So I just want to thank Julia for coming on today because she's absolutely helped us understand how you can find your Ikigai and how you can be comfortable in ambiguity, comfortable in the unknown to make your leap of fate a reality.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Randy. This was a pleasure.
My pleasure. If anybody had any questions, Julia, to reach out to you, how could they find you? And again, everything she says will be in the bio of this.
Yeah, great question. So I would say LinkedIn is probably good. My LinkedIn is, LinkedIn URL and then li-Julia. Send me a note there. Or, you can follow me on Instagram on a personal note if you want to. That's at wjulia. Just send me a message because I don't accept people I don't know. And then, one last plug is I write a sustainability newsletter. So if you are trying to learn how to be a little more sustainable in your day-to-day life, go to Julia-Lee. Again, that's Lee spelled li.medium.com. My newsletter is called Trash Talk. I started it when I was at Google and I recently relaunched it for an external audience. So
that's a good name. Trash Talk. I like that.
Check it out.
So all those links will be in the bio. Please go check them out. Again, this is the Leap of Fate podcast. My name is Randy Silver. Please subscribe on all channels, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, everything I probably didn't name, at RandySilver09 or at Leap of Fate Pod. Julia, thank you so much for coming on today. Please, I'm so excited to do the sign off with you. So repeat after me. Stay healthy.
Stay healthy.
Stay wealthy.
Stay wealthy.
And have a good week, fans.
And have a good week, fans.
Deuces.
Deuces.
Bye, everybody. Until next week.